Starting. Okay, fantastic. So I know that I uploaded last week's class onto the YouTube. So those who missed last week's class, you can watch, you can catch up. But again, I'd also, like, as we said last week, we want to try and make this a commitment every week. And I'd rather obviously having everyone in the class together. I wouldn't like it if people just feel, oh, if I missed it, I can just, like, you know, click on and watch next week. So if possible, please, as much as you can, try and be here for the classes. Sienna, you can catch up, and I think everyone else was here last week, but I think you'll be familiar with some of the ideas we even touched on last week. Last week we started talking about the idea of tzimtzum, the concept of what we call the step down, the idea that Hashem, essentially the infinite being that is Hashem, right? In order for there to be a world, not to be an existence which we are, so to speak, living in, there has to be a concealment of that light. The light is completely, it's just so incredibly powerful beyond our understanding that nothing can exist beyond that light. The example I've heard, by the way, someone once gave us an analogy, I think was a very, very powerful and good analogy, was this concept that if you would get like one of these halogen lamps, like a billion candle, you know, you have some of these lamps called like a million candle lamp or a 2 million candle lamp or whatever it's going to be, right? So some of these candles can be like, you know, you see a billion candle wattage, right? There's a billion candles, and you were shining it onto my face, right? So what would happen is you would see nothing. You wouldn't be able to see a thing. There'd be nothing at all there because there's just light. That's all there is, just light, just light. There's nothing else but light. Everyone familiar with this idea? Right? If all you have is just light, there's nothing you can see. So in order for me to be seen, you'd have to start turning down the wattage of the lamp. You'd have to start turning down from 1 billion to 1 million to 1,000 to 100 to 10 to 5 to 1, and then now you can see that I'm there, but while the light is on me, I'm not there. I'm completely concealed. It's like somewhat of an analogy of what we started talking about last week. But we also talked about the idea of patterns, talked about the 5, and if you remember, I showed you that we had this this chart that I was going to be showing you, that we were going to be going through together. The chart is here. Okay, I'm going to show you now, just so we can have a little brief kind of remembering of what we're going to be talking about. Here is the chart. Okay, we're going to be going through all the 5 levels, starting with worlds and the shamas, and we're going to be filling this out as we go along. Okay, but in the meantime, just to give the context for today's class. Today's class, we're going to be focusing in, we talked about the 5 universes, which are the step down. So if you would use the analogy, what's happening is, this is, again, I wish I could be in front of you all. It's you have to appreciate the challenge it is for me to be so far away and trying to teach on screens and stuff. It's difficult for me. But if you would understand that what's happening it's a two-way street. On the one hand, you have a concealment. Okay, you've got concealment. I'm just going to take this out because you've got concealment. In other words, there is no, we're talking about here the Or Ein Sof, the light of the Ein Sof. Ein Sof we mentioned was ever-ending light. Lights, the Or Ein Sof, and you've got gradual levels of concealment in order to have what down here would appear to be revealed. This is from our perspective, right? This is us. We are here in the lowest level. We're in the world of Asiya, which we talked about last week, the lowest level. And here in our level, things are revealed, right? And up there, there is the concealment of Hashem, right? So actually, to say it better, actually, I'll say it better than this, actually. I'll say it better for you. It's like this. It's a much better way of doing it. It's like this. Really, 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 from Hashem's perspective, if we can talk about Hashem's perspective, right, and up here, everything is revealed. Okay, from the Olamos, everything is revealed. And as you get down, it just steps down, steps down, steps down, steps down, the light. So here, his light is very much concealed. Hashem's light is so concealed that we can exist, that we can see the world around us. There's me, there's you, there's difference, there's differentiation. Okay, Hashem's energy is concealed so much, it goes down so much, and it's concealed so much that we can exist. Anyone here studied physics before? Or anyone studied quantum? Anyone out there? Is there anybody out there? I don't know if there's anyone out there anymore. No, if anyone here studied sort of physics or quantum physics, anything like that, they may or may not know that the incredible revelation that happened through quantum physics in the like sort of 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. What came through there was the understanding that the world is just basically energy. It's just all the world is energy. Okay. If you would get any matter, I've spoken about this so many times. Just, for example, I've got here my headphones that I use to protect my ears from the kids. I've got something much better. I'll show you later what that is, right? But basically, this is all just electrons that are buzzing around. The whole world around me is electrons. Everything's just electrons buzzing around. That's all it is. That is the chiddush of quantum, okay? But yet, at the same time, we in our world of Asiya, we see physical objects with borders, with boundaries, and with edges. So there is concealment. The lower down you come, right? Hashem's light is completely concealed, and that's why we can exist. That's why we can be. But on the other hand, that's in the world of Olamos. We call the Olamos is the universes. There's just a step down, constant step down, and the more step down you go down, the more concealment there is. However, in the world of neshama, in the world of soul, okay, something just happened there. I don't know what it was. In the world of soul, it's actually the other way around, right? Okay, in the world of soul, it goes like this. In the soul world, it's actually the opposite. From soul perspective, it's most revealed down here. Okay, you know yourself, who you are, and as each level that we go up, it becomes more and more concealed, okay, until we don't understand the highest levels of the soul are the levels that we don't understand, that we can't get in contact with. Okay, so you're going to see that now. We're going to go in, we're going to read, and this will give you the preempt of what we're talking about. So let's go. We're on page 16, the inner space. Okay, so I'm going to ask, who didn't read last week? Emily, did you read last week?
Go
for it. You didn't read. Go, the inner space.
Sorry, page
16. It says the inner space.
You've only sent 17 and onwards, and I've missed
so you know, because last week it was in last week's one. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I can find that. Hold on. Okay, sorry. The inner space. The Kabbalists.
Sorry.
The Kabbalists refer to 5 levels of the soul, the highest level corresponding to Adam Kadmon, and the apex of the Yud is Yechida, unique essence. The next, corresponding to the letter of the Yud itself, is Chaya, living essence. The next 3, corresponding to the last 3 letters of the name, are Neshama, which is breath, Ruach, spirit, and finally Nefesh, soul.
Okay.
Do you want me to read the chart?
Okay, fine. So what we're saying here is there are 5 levels to your soul. Okay, there are 5 levels to the soul. That's what we want to know. The highest level, and again, we talk about always correspondence. So this is going to help you if you look at the screen. Okay, this will help a little bit. You know, it's so interesting. Like, I'm like juggling all these things together. It's such fun. But look at the screen now. Here we go. Ready? Okay, so here on the side, you've got here. What's it? Hold on, say, guys. Everyone can mute themselves if possible. If you're not speaking, mute themselves. Someone's smashing things there. I don't know what they are. I'm a smashing day. Okay, here we go, right? So here, on the left-hand side, we've got the 5 levels of the universes. Adam Kadmon, going down Atzilus, Bria, Yetzira, Asiya. The level of the world that we can appreciate and see is Asiya. Okay? Now remember, everything's going to correspond. Everything's going to correspond. So corresponding to Adam Kadmon, the highest level, is going to be the level of what we call Yechida. Yechida is the level of our soul corresponding to Adam Kadmon. The level of our soul corresponding to Atzilus is Chaya. The level of our soul corresponding to Bria is Neshama. And the level of our soul corresponding to Yetzira is Ruach. And the level of our soul that corresponds to Asiya, the lowest level, is what we call Nefesh. So that little chart I drew to you before is what I was trying to show to you is like this. We know our nefesh better than any other part of our soul. So it's most revealed to us. So at the lowest level of the soul is where we have most revelation. And the highest level of our soul, Yechida, is where we have the least level of revelation. There's most concealment. Whereas on the other side, if you look at the worlds, Asiya is where we live in the most level of concealment. And Adam Kadmon, so to speak, is where there's the most amount of revelation from Hashem's perspective. So it's like kind of like almost like a Mogin David. There's like, there's concealment by us and revelation by Hashem, okay, and revelation and concealment, they go up and down both ways. So let's look now. We've written down here you've got the actual in the text here. You've got already this written down. So let's carry on, Emily, looking at the etymology.
Looking at the etymology of these terms, we see that the word Yechida comes from Echad and Yichud, meaning oneness and unity. The word Chaya derives from Chai, which means life, and Chayut, which is life force. The word Neshama stems from Neshima, meaning breath, and the word Ruach is often translated as spirit, but it is also found with the connotations of wind, air, or direction. The word Nefesh comes from the root Nafash, meaning to rest, and as in the verse, and on the seventh day he ceased work and rested, which is Nafash.
Okay, so pause there a second. What Ariel Kaplan is doing in this paragraph is just showing in terms of the etymology. Each level of the soul is not just a random name that was picked, right? Each name, and we're going to see now how each name that you're given for those levels of your soul represents what that level of the soul is doing, okay? And he shows it through different psukim. And the words, nefesh is nafash, rest. Ruach is spirit moving. Neshama, he says, is from neshima, breathing. Chaya, life force. Yechida, unity. We're going to now see how it comes out. The next paragraph, the next two paragraphs is going to explain this, and we're going to get into what's called the glass blower analogy. Okay, carry on.
The Kabbalists teach that the 5 levels of man's soul, which originates in the highest realms, parallel the 5 universes and correspond to the inner dimension of each universe. The universes represent the external space or dimension of God's relationship to the world. The soul, on the other hand, represents the inner space of that relationship.
Okay, this is that sentence I think is worth repeating. The universe is, that's again Adam Kadmon, Atzilus, Bria, Yetzira, Sia. Those universes, they represent the external space of relationship, whereas the soul is the inner space of that relationship. Okay, we're on next page, page 17. You're doing great, Emily. Just carry on for this, but then we'll switch speaker.
The 5 levels of the soul thus form a chain linking man to the supernal universes and to God. Since the soul constitutes the inner dimension of the universes and the reason for which God originally concealed his light, man's primary connection is directly with God. Thus the Torah says, and God blew into his nostrils a soul of life. Commenting on the inner meaning of this verse, the Zohar notes that when God exhales, he does so from his innermost being. Furthermore, even after having placed his breath into man's body, his breath is still not severed from him. This indicates that man's soul is an extension of God's breath and is directly connected to him.
Okay, we've discussed this quite a few times in various self-fitness classes. We've talked about the idea of breathing, and it just comes back to, when we do the breathing, when we sit and we breathe properly, okay, and we just focus on the breath, mindfulness classes out there, when you go to normal secular mindfulness, teaching, go back to your breath, come back to your breath, it's all about the breath. Well, there's a reason why, because the understanding is that Hashem blew life into us. When you go back to Bereshis, the beginning of Bereshis, when Hashem formed man, how did he put the soul into us? He blew that breath into us. Therefore, the formation of the soul comes from a process of breath, of blowing breath into every single one of us. Somehow, and again, God doesn't have a mouth. It's very important to understand this. God doesn't have lungs. God doesn't have the muscles around the lungs, the diaphragm. This is all obviously, we're not talking about lungs and air. We're talking about the idea though of conceptually how Shem blew that life into us, and that life force is continually and constantly being blown into us every single second, every single minute of our lives. That life is being blown into us. And that's how now we get into what we call the glass blower analogy. And through this, hopefully we'll have a better understanding still of the 5 levels of the soul and how they relate to us and how they relate to our relationship with Hashem. So the glass blower analogy, this is brought down in many, many places, especially in the works of Chabad. They really use the glass blower analogy to explain what is going on. I suggest if you read this now, but in your own time, you can read it through again. You get an even better and deeper understanding of what this means. I'll obviously try and draw it as well. Let's go. We're going to ask actually a volunteer to read. That volunteer maybe Ollie Burns, and it might be Sienna. So I think it's going to have to be Sienna. Go for it, Sienna.
Oh, I don't mind if someone else wants to read.
No, I was winding Ollie up. Okay.
I don't mind reading.
Sienna, you start, then Ollie, you're taking over. So watch out, Ollie. Okay.
It's really embarrassing. I've forgotten the place. Is it at the start of the glass blower analogy?
The glass blower analogy. We're going to welcome Leon in, and then we're going to do the glass blower analogy. Go for it. Yeah. It says the glass blower analogy. You see that? Yeah.
Glass blower analogy. This relationship can be illustrated with an analogy. Imagine a glass blower who decided to make a beautiful vessel. This decision, emanating from the innermost will, is the level of yechida, uniqueness. It corresponds to the universe of Adam Kadmon and the apex of Yod.
Okay. Next. Right. So just again, so pause there 1 second. Let's just pull this up. So when we start talking the whole time, we're always using this as our background. Remember this whole little chart we've got here, right? This is the Adam Kadmon, Atilus, Bria, Yitzira. See on the left-hand side is the universes. And then the Shama always corresponds to those 5 levels. So on the level of Adam Kadmon, which we said last week is the first step, so to speak, away from the Ein Sof, it's so completely nichlal, it's so completely close, it's almost directly connected, but it's just one small step away from the Ein Sof. The word, by the way, Adam, right? What does the word Adam mean? Anybody know the word Adam?
Man.
It means man, but what does the word Adam, he's Adam Aluf is with us. Ground, that's Adamah. And also, more importantly here, the word Adameh, Dimyon. Who speaks Hebrew? Anyone? Sienna, you speak Hebrew, right?
Imagination, Dimyon.
Dimyon is imagination, but Adameh, lidmot in Hebrew. And domeh, hu domeh la'aba kol kach.
Yeah.
What does it mean?
Likeness, similar.
Likeness, exactly. To be like. Adam, the actual word Adam means to be like. That's why we get the name Adam, because we in all creation are the beings that can aspire to be like Hashem. But in the word Adam Kadmon, Adam here means the element of the universe which is most like Hashem. It's primordial closeness. That's the level of Adam Kadmon, and that is Yechida. So in what we've just read now in this paragraph, imagine a man, you've got this guy, let's call him Luigi, a glass blower in Venice, right? So he's made a decision now that he wants to blow some glass. So in the level of decision, that's what Yechida is. That is the thought that's not yet coming to any fruition. It's just a decision, I want to make something. Okay, carry on. You're doing great, Sienna.
Am I muted? No, I'm not muted.
No. Next we see.
All right. Next we see the glass blower himself before he begins to blow out. This is the level of Chaya, living essence, corresponding to the universe of Atzilut, where the life force is still within the realm of the divine. This level parallels the Yod of
the Tetragrammaton, which is what we're talking about here each time. The Tetragrammaton is the name Yud, with a Hey, a Vav, Hey, Hashem's name, Yud K, Vav K, okay, which we spoke about many times, Yud, Hey, and a Vav, and Hey, Hashem's name. So it's all paralleled out. So once again, you've got here in the word Atzilus, that's the word the universe, it's one step away from Adam Kadmon. I wish there was a way that I could, is there a way that I can, how do I actually, can't, no, it's real. I wish I could like highlight with this, I can't, it won't let me. It's very, very nice. It's such a shame. I wish I could like kind of push something and highlight it. Can you see my mouse going over this? Can you see that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, good. Okay, fine. So I can point. Okay, so Adam Kadmon. Okay, so Atzilus is the next level down. Okay, that parallels the Yud, which parallels Chaya. It's the actual life being, that force, the glass blower himself. Yechida was the thought. Chaya is the actual glass blower himself. That's the next level down. Okay, carry on. Sienna, doing great.
Next, the breath, nishima, emanates from the mouth of the glass blower and flows as a pressurized wind, ruach, through the glass blowing pipe, expanding in all directions and forming a crude vessel. The wind finally comes to rest,
Nafash.
in the completed vessel.
Okay, finally, nafash, it's completed. Vessel is where it stops. Okay, so one last paragraph and we're going to pause for a second. This analogy.
This analogy is extremely useful in a meditative sense. For one thing, it provides us with a model for comparing various states of consciousness with the different levels of the soul. For another, it allows us to visualize our own direct connection with the divine.
Okay, so thank you first of all for some excellent reading there. Just how's this going for people? People are kind of getting this a little bit. Does it make some sort of sense? It's not simple stuff. Okay, Luffy, making some sense. It's very, very conceptual. It's very hard to understand. Sienna is nodding. Okay.
I kind of get it. Am I muted? I'm not.
No,
I kind of get it. It's where it relates to the yod, hey, but I sort of get it. It's the words are very foreign, even though I speak Hebrew.
Yeah, so that's what we said last. That's why we said last week. The whole purpose of these classes is to try and give us a little bit more understanding of the vocabulary. Okay, that's what it's literally like doing vocab lessons. Like trying to understand vocab. So watch this. This might help. Okay, and guys, please. One of the things I told you is really important to like speak out, like unmute yourself, speak, ask. I'm trying my hardest to make it as interactive as possible, and it is quite hard to get the interaction going. But I'll try my hardest here. Okay, take a look. Here we go. So the way we understand is when you have the glass blowing, yeah. So let's just say you've got a vessel, right? You've got this vessel. It's going to be a very beautiful. I don't know, what should it be, guys? A very beautiful vase. Okay, the Shabbos, a beautiful vase. It's going to be like beautiful colors. It's going to be all like gorgeous colors, a bit of red there as well. Look at that. You know how you've seen people blow glass before? It's really cool. I don't know how it still amazes me how they can do it, by the way. I'm always fascinated by it. Okay, but you've got a lovely glass vessel there, okay? Now,
did you get the place in Devon, Dov, where they did it when you were there?
I did not see that, no. I have to go back again.
Yeah. That's
okay.
Glass.
Yeah. I'll have to go back to some glassing. Okay, so you've got the vessel itself. How does he do it? Okay, so the way he does it is like this. The glass blower, he has in his mind an idea. He'd like to make himself a vase. Right? So he has the idea in his mind, what he wants to do. He wants to have a vase. He's kind of imagined it. He's kind of thinking about it. He wants that vase to be made. Okay, so that's the level of just existing in his mind that there's going to be a vase. That we're going to say is the level of Yechida. Okay, it's the level that's above. Okay, it's just totally conceptual. Next, you have the glass blower themselves. Whatever this person. Okay, he's got some glasses. Just I made a mistake there, so we'll give him some glasses. Okay, he's happy. Obviously, he's happy because he's a servant of Hashem. If there's Hashem b'simcha, he's got a nice big strimer as well. He's a Hasidic glass blower. Okay, here we go. Okay. You asked me where his pairs are. Okay, fine. Here we go. Okay, and a beard. I know. Okay, don't start. Okay, listen. So next is the actual person themselves. Okay, that's the chaya. So why is it a good idea? Why does it make sense that we call that chaya? Because chaya is life force. Okay, so that's the actual life force, the chaya, which is going to do the blowing. Okay, then the breath itself that's going to emanate from him, the breath is going to be called neshama. The breath is going to be called neshama. Guys, why does it make sense that we call the breath neshama?
Because neshima is breath.
Excellent. Right, because neshima is the word for breath in Hebrew. Sorry about the writing here. Okay, neshama is going to be the breath itself. Okay, can you see until now, this is like existed sort of conceptually and the person himself. That's in the conceptual level. Neshama is the first time that we start actually seeing the breath itself being formed. So the breath is now here, and how does it get put into the vessel? It gets blown into the vessel, and that movement of neshama from the person to the vessel is what we call ruach. And why does it make sense we call that level of the soul ruach?
Because it's a spirit. I'm not sure why.
Be more than that. Why does it make sense that we would call the part of the soul which is moving?
Oh, because it's movement.
Rabbi Dov, is that not wind?
Very good. Yes.
Thank you.
Good,
And my Hebrew is pretty non-existent.
Okay, but we know yesh ruach po. Okay, ruach is the idea of wind, of things moving. That is ruach. So that's why it makes sense to call the level of the soul, which is the movement of the breath towards the resting point, is called ruach. And then finally, that ruach goes in to the vessel, okay, to the actual chomer, goes into the actual silicon, the melted sand, okay, which we would probably just call the body, okay, the guf, okay, and that place where it rests, where it comes to rest. So, okay, so the breath is really strong, but as soon as that breath kind of rests and stops, that's going to give it the shape, yeah? So that level of the soul which comes to rest and interfaces, so to speak, with the body is called the nefesh, the lowest part of the soul. And guys, why does it therefore make sense that that lowest part of the soul is called nefesh? Because you have to look inside what Rav Kaplan has said here. He says here, the word nefesh, so you look back on page 16, the second last paragraph, and the last sentence there, the word nefesh comes from the root nafash, meaning to rest, as in the verb. And on the seventh day, he ceased work and rested. Anyone who's familiar with the song we sing on Friday night in Shul, V'shamru, which people like the song, V'shamru v'nei Yisrael, es ha-Shabbos la'asais ha-Shabbos, v'dor zamir Yisrael la'am, beini v'nei Yisrael ois yelam, ki sheishes yamim asa Hashem, es ha-shamayim v'es haaretz. It's 7 days Hashem created the world, the heavens and the earth, u'vayom ha-shvi'i, on the seventh day, Shabbos, he stopped, v'yinafash, and he rested. Therefore, nefesh connotes resting. Okay?
But why is it resting? Is it because it's resting in our body?
Because that is hit the point now where it needs to be. It's come to the end point where it's now interfacing with the body. That's why nefesh is the lowest part of the soul. Okay, so let's take the journey again. Just glass blow now, glass blow. A guy has an idea, he wants a vase. Therefore, he takes a big, deep breath. And then he blows that air, goes through in, travels, and then it goes into the glass and it rests at a certain place and makes that sort of space inside the glass thing. And then you have a glass vessel. That's from a glass blower. Now let's talk about the soul. Hashem, right, conceptually creates. And then Hashem himself takes that holy soul and, so to speak, blows it into our body, and then that soul rests inside of us. And this process is happening all the time. Right now, it's happening to you constantly. This is a process which is continual. These are the 5 levels of the soul. Nefesh being the lowest, Ruach the level up, Neshama the level up, and Chaya and Yechida. By the way, we're going to say in a little bit, not now, he's going to say, Rav Kaplan, just to let you know, that these 2 levels of the soul, Yechida and Chaya, okay, these 2 levels are called, they are called Mafikim. They are levels which we can't really, at this point in our lives, until Mashiach comes, we can't really connect to these 2 levels of our soul. They are not something which we are able to really either understand or familiarize with ourselves at all with Yechida and Chaya, whereas these levels are called Peninim. We're going to come back in a second to it, don't worry. But Peninim, that's neshama, ruach, and nefesh. Those are the 3 levels of soul which we can connect with and understand. Although obviously it takes a long time, it takes a whole process of learning. But most of the time we spend in nefesh. We sometimes come up to ruach, and occasionally we can be in neshama. If you work hard enough and daven hard enough, you can get to levels of neshama as well. But this is what we call the glass blower analogy. So let's just see again. Let's go back into. I'm actually taking a little photo of this because it's kind of helping. I couldn't access last week's photos. I should take a photo. Okay, let's come back in the room here. Stop share. Hello, everybody. So lovely to see you all. Okay, so carrying on. Ollie now we will ask Ollie to speak. Let's just see where it says here in this page, the highest levels of the soul. Go for it.
Okay. The highest levels of the soul, for instance, are not yet separated from the divine source. Thus, in the analogy, they are both still within the mind and lungs of the glass blower.
Pause there. Pause there. Given the diagram I just drew, does that make a bit of sense to you?
Yeah.
Ray, I don't know if you're with me, Ray. It's just the end of the day in Australia, so I can't tell. Given the analogy we just the diagram, that makes sense, right? Yeah. Okay. Cool. Carry on, Ollie.
From God's point of view, they are internal aspects of man's soul, while the lower levels of the soul are externalizations. This is an extremely important distinction, but from the human standpoint, the exact opposite is the case.
Okay, this is what I was trying to say earlier. It always swaps around, right? So from Hashem's perspective, it's internal. From our perspective, it's external. But from our perspective, it's internal. From Hashem's perspective, it's external. This is always the swap over.
So
attached to God, so it's still God sees it as part of God.
Yeah, and it's less and less and less it comes away from Him to us. Whereas for us, it's the most internal, and the most external. It's just always a complete crossover. It's like the Magen David. I told you the Magen David, right? It's the most internal and comes down. It's most concealed, and by us, it's the most internal, and by Hashem, it's most concealed.
Okay.
You get that?
Is it possible to somehow explain what you more mean by external and internal? Like,
well, again, what do the words external and internal mean? What do they actually mean? Just translate them in English. Internal is something which is close to you. The more internal something is, the more it's close, right? And more part of you. The more internal something is, the more it's connected to you. The more external something is, the further away it is from you. Nachon? You know what I mean? So from Hashem's perspective, Chai and Yechida are totally internal. Whereas Nefesh, so to speak, again, when we talk about Hashem, it's always by way of analogy. Hashem is one, right? So from Hashem's perspective, it's all the same. It's always one. But just if you could get into this kind of analogy, the analogy, Chai and Yechid are the most internal, and Nefesh is the most external, because it's the bit that's quote unquote, heavy quotation marks, the furthest away from Him, right?
Yeah.
Whereas for us, from our perspective, Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama are the most internal, because that's what we can explain. We can have it. And Chai and Yechida are completely external. We don't really have any connection with it. So does that make sense?
Yeah.
Internal is something you can connect to. External, something just further away from you. Yeah.
We exist in all of these aspects, right? It's just
100%.
So just the most physical aspect. The most physical aspect of us is where God's light is the most restricted, and we can only
Pause. The most physical. I don't know about what you mean by that. The most physical aspect.
Just our being, just our being.
Us as a human being, right? The most,
Yeah.
Carry on.
And I guess our highest levels, our divine soul or whatever, is at the very other end, which is where.
Yeah. No, you're saying, and that's existing all the time. You, Ollie Burns, right now are made up of a nefesh, a ruach, and a shama, a chai, and a yechida. You can't, just like me, like everyone else in the world, can't connect to the chai and yechida aspect. It's way beyond in this current existence for us to really. But it's there. It's happening right now. As Hashem is continuously giving you a life force, you have a chai and yechida. That's the most external part. It's not for you, but you can understand to a certain extent what's going on in your nefesh. Okay, and as you grow and know more, we can know more about our ruach and our neshama somewhat, and that is what we're trying to do in these lessons, in these classes, as life goes on, to just have a better understanding of what's happening in our nefesh and our ruach neshama. That's
Okay,
what
cool.
we can do. But this helps, the glass blow analogy helps to understand. Nefesh is where the end part where the soul and the body interface. That's why it's considered the lowest part of the soul. Ruach is that movement. That's why it's linked to emotion. Very much your emotion is linked to ruach. Okay, and the neshama is even higher still. That's like the breath that just emanates from Hashem. That's why neshama is the highest level that we can kind of connect to down here. It's the highest one because it's like the breath of Hashem himself, the actual breath itself. The neshama, the breath. Wow, this is right. This is powerful stuff. Let's go. Karen, this last paragraph here of the 5 parts of the soul. Yeah.
Of the 5 parts of the soul, the neshama, ruach, and nefesh are called the peni'im internalizations because we have the ability to draw these levels down into our earthly existence. The levels of Yechida and Chaya, however, will only be internalized in the world to come. It is for this reason that they are now called Makifim envelopes or Atorata crown or Torat crowns, because they actually transcend our individual personalities.
So what he's saying here is we need to know about it, but the reality is it's far beyond our comprehension. It's the crowns. It's in our and of course they correspond to the highest levels of the olamos, things like Adam Kadmon, Atzilus, which are basically beyond our comprehension to understand really what's going on. And as we go through the olamos in the further classes, you'll see why that is and how that works. And that's the levels where the spheros are literally in the level of Adam Kadmon. The spheros don't really exist; they exist conceptually. We'll get there. Page 18. I'd like to ask if everyone doesn't mind. Deborah, do you want to read page 18 for me? Top of page 18.
Sure, one sec. From this is alluded to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. This is alluded to in the Talmudic statement that in the ultimate future there will be no jealousy, hatred, or strife. The righteous will sit with their crowns in their heads, delighting in the radiance of the divine presence. The symbolism of a crown resting on top of the head generally represents our inability to perceive or grasp a spiritual concept with our minds. As a result, this concept is said to transcend human intellect and envelop it from without. In the world to come, however, these crowns will be in their heads. Man will be able to perceive the radiance of the divine to the greatest extent possible without completely losing his individuality.
Okay, I think we had to mention this paragraph, but I don't want to dwell too much because again, we start talking about things like Chai and Yechida, things that we don't really understand. It's very difficult for us to get there. But the main thing he's saying here is that in the Olam Haba, in the world to come, these crowns will be in our heads, not on our heads, but in our heads. There'll be an ability to completely perceive the radiance of the divine to the greatest extent possible without completely losing your individuality. From where we are now, we can't go into those worlds without being completely nichlal, being completely absorbed and losing ourselves entirely. Okay, so now let's just start. We've got 10 minutes. Let's go in a little bit more because we want to cover some ground. So let's start going into these different levels of the soul. Okay, so also before we do that, just one more thing, that I know some of you were in the first Super Soul Sunday class that we did, but some of you weren't. So it's just worth repeating an analogy that Rav Aryeh Kaplan describes in talking about the name Yud Kei Vav Kei. Okay, so here we go. He says you have the tetragrammaton, which is Yud. Sorry, I'm just going to change the color. Oh, don't do this to me. What's going on? It's annoying. Okay, so here you have the Yud. Oh, what's going on? Oh my gosh, my pen stopped working. Don't stop working, pen. My trusty pen. I can't believe my pen has just stopped working, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry about that. I'm gonna have to draw for you with my mouse, which actually is even better. Okay, you got the Yud, you've got a Hey. Oh wow, I can draw with a mouse really well. You got a Vav, and you got a Hey. Okay, this is Hashem's name, the Tetragrammaton, and we also mentioned, if you remember, you've got the Kotza Shel Yod, which is called the thorn above the Yud. Okay,
Is that what that is? Okay.
Okay. So he says, if you remember, he talks about the idea of giving charity, right? Giving charity is you have the yud, which is the idea, the concept of giving. Someone wants to give charity. You have the thought of giving. I'm sorry, I'm writing with a mouse. Okay. Well, I don't know why my pen just stopped working. It's really weird. Thought of giving. Okay, and then you've got the hey. Hey, we said, if you remember, was the hand. Someone's hand. Is that 5 fingers? I don't know. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, they're bending their finger down there. Don't worry about that. Yeah. So this is the hand. Remember, hand is 5 fingers. Hey is 5 in gematria. Is the hand that wants to give. Okay. Then vav is like always. Vav is a connector. That's why it's long. Okay. There's the connecting point. The connect that takes you, that connects you to the hand that receives. I'm sorry about this, guys. I feel really bad, but the pen has literally just stopped breaking now. This, please work. What's going on here? I don't know why it's not working. It's so frustrating. Maybe it lost its Bluetooth connection.
You need to charge them. You probably need to charge it.
No. It's really annoying. Okay, this is the hand. The vav is what connects, and then last hey is the hand that receives. So I'm just going to draw a hand here that receives. The hand that receives, yeah? Everyone got that? Sorry about the really rubbish kind of thing, right? You have the conception, you have the hand that gives, that connects you to the hand that receives. This is always the Yud Hey Vav Hey. I had to just give that to you because as we read on now, he's going to make reference to this, so we need to know what's going on. Okay, let's go back in. Let's go back. Who hasn't read yet? Deborah, you were reading. Yes, sorry. You were reading. Go, Deborah. Nefesh. Go, Nefesh. The lower part.
Sorry. Nefesh. The lowest part of the soul interfaces with the physical body. This is the level where we are able to accept the spirituality that God desires to give us. Hence, it parallels the hand that receives, the final hey of the
The tetragrammaton. Okay? And that's why when you see here, let's go back to our thing. That's why when you have in Hashem's name, you've got the Kotza Shayud, the Yud, the Hey, the Vav, the Hey. That's why Nefesh corresponds to the Hey, because the Hey is the hand that receives. So to Nefesh is the lowest place, which where it rests, where the will of Hashem rests is on the Nefesh. That's why it corresponds to the Hey that receives, the level of Asiyah. Guys, you start to see how patterns are developing. There's nothing more beautiful than seeing that. Okay, carry on.
It is on the level of nefesh that a person gains an awareness of the body as a receptacle for the spiritual. This is only possible, however, when one is able to isolate himself from the constant stream of internal and external stimuli that occupies his thoughts. Awareness of the spiritual thus necessarily begins by quieting down the awareness of the physical. It is for this reason that this part of the soul is essentially passive rather than active. Before one is ready to experience the powerful influence of Ruach, all static must be tuned out. This is also suggested by the term nefesh, which literally means resting soul.
Okay, so anyone who's been to the class, which is all of you, I think at least once, I think, yeah, no, you've even been to one class, I think you came to one soul fitness, I'm not sure. We'll know that this is one of the things we talk about the whole time when essentially we talk about meditation, or even mindfulness, if you want to put it that way. It's like the static has to be tuned out, the noise has to be tuned out. The body is amazing and is essential, but essentially the body is also very noisy, and therefore we just have to kind of tone the body down. We have to just calm ourselves down, tune out the static, and only then can you start getting an access to the world of your nefesh, which is again your lowest part of your soul. But to activate it, to get there, one has to kind of turn down, I always use this analogy, turn down the volume of your body, and then you can get there. Then you can somehow start to feel it and start to get there to that point of the nefesh, which is the resting soul, the lowest part of your soul. I think we've got time just to go into ruach, and then next week we'll continue on the shama. So who hasn't read for us? Who hasn't? David, yes, you haven't read for a long time. Go, David, ruach. I'll just unmute you, mate. Go on a second. Okay. And now you've just jammed yourself. Okay, so it won't unmute. David, you're muted. I can't unmute you. So David, are you there? You look like you're praying. Can you even hear me? I don't know. Are you praying to the Lord? So hold on a second. You won't unmute. You're completely muted, mate. Can you unmute yourself? Ah, finally, yes, I unmuted you. I unmuted you. Right, go for it. Yeah. Ruach. Start from the of Ruach. Go. David, go, yeah. The second level.
The second level of the soul is Ruach, the wind blowing down to us from God's breath. Really small, my dear. The wind is, and there you go. The wind is seen as a connection between God's mouth, as it were, and the person. Therefore, it parallels the vav of the tetragrammaton, which also denotes connection and transition.
Okay, wait, pause a second. So you saw in the diagram I showed you, that should be clear now, right? The vav is always that line in the Torah. When it talks about the construction of the Mishkan, the word vav implies a hook. Vav is always a hook, right? That's what connects one thing to another. It's that hook point. And therefore, if you think about the analogy of the glass blower, the glass blower has to blow into the pipe. The vav essentially is that pipe, right? Essentially, it's the connection point. That's why, if we look again, it's just to show you because it's fun to see. In the analogy, Ruach is connected to Vav and Yetzirah. Okay, carry on, please, David. You're doing a great job.
When the air around us is at rest, are we aware of it? We are aware of the air when there is wind. Similarly, we are aware of the sea of spirituality that surrounds us when we experience the level of Ruach, which is like a spiritual wind in motion. At this level, a person goes beyond the quiet spirituality of Nefesh and feels a completely different kind of motion. In this state of consciousness, information can be communicated. One can see visions, hear things, and become conscious of higher levels of spirituality. Okay. Reaching the level of Ruach,
one second, David. So whereas in Nefesh, we said Nefesh is a little more passive. Nefesh is just getting to a place where you can be aware. It's like an awareness of your soul. Okay, an awareness of something greater than just your body, an awareness of something higher than just your physical self. Ruach takes it up to another level of motion, of emotion, of things actually growing and happening. You can see visions, hear things, become conscious of higher levels of spirituality. You go above a level above passive. Carry on, David.
Reaching the level of Ruach, one feels a moving spirit rather than a quieting one. At the highest levels, this becomes the experience of Ruach HaKodesh, divine inspiration.
This is the prophetic state. Person feels completely elevated and transformed by God's spirit, right? The idea of Ruach lifting you up, the God's spirit lifting you up, right? We talk about the idea of being spiritual, right? This is sort of being lifted, and of course, whereas Ruach HaKodesh, divine inspiration, is something which is beyond us. The idea of being inspired and feeling being pushed into higher levels. I'm sure we've all been somewhere in our life, a place somewhere we've been to or visited, where suddenly you just find yourself lifted, moved. It's not just being aware, you're moved to something. You feel emotional suddenly. You know, people sometimes, they might get it at the kotel. Suddenly they'll just start crying. Well, where did that come from? Like, you know, you find people that are never religious in their lives before, something feel that, right? Or you could be in Svat, or you could be at a wedding, or you could be somewhere that just you feel moved and lifted up a level. And that's the level of Ruach. And of course, it makes perfect sense in the analogy because Ruach means wind. It means energy. It's things, not energy, sorry. Ruach means wind. It means a force which is blowing, which is moving. It's not staying static and still. It's 12:32, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to stop here the class today, but next week, of course, next week is a massive treat for everyone. So